The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are rapidly transforming the global stage. My name's Anthony. I'm from the Online Business Network, and thanks for stopping by. What we're going to do is we're going to take a closer look at the BRICS nations in this video, check out the landscape, and we'll also take a closer look at what BRICS is, the significance of its member countries and the challenges they may face or are facing in shaping the future of the world economy. So if you could, once again, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you on board. So BRICS nations are emerging economies that are rapidly gaining traction in the global economic landscape. And in the last decade, these countries have transformed their economic structures and accelerated their growth. Way back in 2001, the term BRIC was coined by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill to describe the four countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, that he believed would lead the global growth in the 21st century. Later, South Africa joined the group, and the term BRICS was officially adopted in 2011. So let's take a closer look at what these five countries and what makes them significant players in the world economy. So the goal of BRICS nations is to promote economic development, cooperation, and stability among its members countries, and to have a greater say in shaping global economic order. BRICS nations aim to establish themselves as an alternative to traditional economic power, such as the United States and Europe. They want to reduce the dependence on these countries and promote more equitable and inclusive economic growth. Additionally, BRICS nations seek to play a more significant role in global governance and international affairs, such as the United Nations and the G20. They aim to have a more significant voice in shaping policies and decision-making processes that affect the world and the world's economy. Ultimately, the goal of BRICS nations is to promote a multipolar world and a multipolar world order where emerging economies have greater representation and an influence in global economic governance. So let's look at the countries as they stand. If you look at Brazil, is the largest economy in South America with the 9th largest in the world. It is rich in natural resources and has a diversified industrial base. Brazil's economy is heavily dependent on agriculture, mining, and manufacturing. And in recent years, the country has faced challenges such as political instability, corruption, and economic recession. However, Brazil has a vibrant startup ecosystem and has made significant progress in their reducing poverty and inequality. Now we'll look at Russia. It is the largest country in the world and has the 11th largest economy. It is one of the largest producers of natural gas and oil in the whole world, which are key drivers of its economy. Russia is also a major exporter of metals, timber, and agricultural products, and the country has faced challenges such as low oil prices, economic sanctions, political unrest, and wars. However, Russia is investing heavily in technology and has a growing startup scene. We look at India now. It's the second most populous country in the world, has the 5th largest economy, is a leading producer of textiles, IT services, and pharmaceuticals. And India's economy is driven by a large and growing consumer market, a young and skilled workforce, and a thriving startup ecosystem. The country faces challenges such as poverty, income equality, and environmental degradation. However, India has made significant progress in reducing poverty and increasing access to education and healthcare. China. China is the most popular country in the world, has the 2nd largest economy. It is a major producer of consumer goods, electronics, machinery, and China's economy is driven by a large and growing consumer market, a vast manufacturing base, and a highly skilled workforce. The country faces challenges such as pollution, income inequality, and a rapidly aging population. However, China has made significant progress in the reducing poverty and increasing access to education and healthcare. South Africa is the most developed economy in Africa and has the third largest economy among the BRICS nations. It is a leading producer of gold, diamonds, and platinum. And South Africa's economy is driven by a growing consumer market, a diversified industrial base, and a well-developed financial sector. The country faces challenges such as high unemployment, inequality, and struggling education system. However, South Africa has made progress in reducing poverty and expanding access to healthcare. So the BRICS nations are significant players in the world economy for several reasons. Firstly, they are growing at a much faster pace than developed nations like the US, Japan, and Western Europe. In fact, the BRICS nations are projected to account for more than half of the world's GDP growth by 2030. Secondly, BRICS nations are becoming major players in international trade and investment, and these countries are establishing themselves. The perception of BRICS nations varies among different stakeholders in the global community. On one hand, BRICS nations are viewed as emerging economic powerhouses that are transforming the global economic landscape. They are seen as engines of growth, innovation, and development with significant potential to shape the future of the world economy. BRICS nations are increasingly being recognised as important players in the international trade, investment, and finance scenes. They are also perceived as a counterbalance to the dominance of traditional economic powers, such as the USA and Europe. On the other hand, BRICS nations are also facing criticism and scepticism from some quarters. Some critics argue that the BRICS concept is overhyped and that these nations face significant economic, social, and political challenges that could impede their progress. And for instance, some critics point to the high levels of inequality, corruption, and political instability in some of these BRICS nations. For example, Brazil and South Africa. And others argue that the growth rates of BRICS nations are slowing down and they may not be able to sustain their current levels of growth for the long term. Additionally, there are concerns about the geopolitical implications of BRICS nations. Some countries, particularly the United States, have expressed concerns about the increasing influence of the BRICS nations in international affairs. They worry that BRICS nations may challenge the existing global economic order and disrupt the status quo. There are also concerns about the potential for conflicts and rivalries among BRICS nations, particularly between China and India, which are both vying for regional and global influence. So overall, the perception of BRICS nations is complex, multifaceted. While they are seen as dynamic and innovative economies with significant potential for growth and development, they also face significant challenges and criticisms. And the future trajectory of BRICS nations will depend on how effectively they can address these challenges and navigate the evolving geopolitical landscape. So there's a bit to take in there. Further to that, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have some advantages and disadvantages. And we'll go through a few of the pros and a few of the cons as sort of touched on in the last little bit of the talk here. So economic growth, the BRICS nations have been experienced robust economic growth rates, providing significant opportunities for investment and trade. The BRICS nations are home to a large proportion of the world's population, which makes them attractive to markets for goods and services. The BRICS nations also possess significant natural resources such as oil, gas, minerals, agricultural land, which makes them critical players in the global resource market. BRICS nations have made significant investments in infrastructure and development, such as roads, railways, airports, and seaports, which could improve connectivity and facilitate trade. They've also made significant strides in innovation and technology, particularly in areas such as renewable energy, biotech, and AI, artificial intelligence. On the flip side of that, BRICS nations are plagued by political instability, which could undermine economic growth, deter investment. They suffer from high levels of income inequality, which could lead to social unrest and political instability. There is a perception of corruption in some of these nations, indicating high levels of corruption in the index in the public and private sectors. BRICS nations have been criticised for their poor environmental record, particularly in areas such as air and water pollution, deforestation, and greenhouse gas emissions. There is a rise of BRICS nations, or the rise of the nations could lead to geopolitical tensions, particularly with traditional economic powers, such as USA and Europe. And overall, the BRICS nations have significant potential for economic growth and development, but they do face those significant challenges that could impede their progress. And the success of the BRICS nations will depend on how effectively they address these challenges and work towards sustainable and inclusive growth. So, in recent times, not so recent, but these nations have moved away from the US dollar. They're doing trade now in their own currencies or currencies other than the US dollar, which is going against what's been normal now for over 80 years or even 100 years, for a long time. And they are certainly making waves around the world. And there are other countries that are looking to get on board and join hands with these guys. So just on that, we'll have a quick look at another document I've got here. 1 second. Bear with me. We're almost there. So this document here. So a new world order. This article was written 10th of April. Predictions about the BRICS countries as the fastest growing economies haven't quite panned out. Instead, the alliance is now offering a diplomatic forum and development finance outside of the Western mainstream. So maybe a little bit of change of tact, but they're still quite active, still in form. And a little bit of history. So the acronym began as a somewhat optimistic term to describe what were the world's fastest growing economies at the time. But now the BRICS nations, Brazil, India, Russia, China, South Africa, are setting themselves up as an alternative to existing international financial and political forums. So the founding myth of the emerging economies has faded, confirmed by the Deputy Director of the German Institute of International and Security Affairs, Gunther. The BRICS countries are experiencing their geopolitical moment. So their growth and their strength is growing. The BRICS countries are trying to position themselves as representatives of the global South, providing an alternative model to the G7. The G7 is an informal forum of heads of state of the world's most advanced economies, founded in 1975. And you can see that Germany, France, United Kingdom, Italy, Japan, Canada, and the US are members. So the EU's in there as well, but the BRICS nations obviously aren't part of that, and they want to set themselves up as an alternative. They, in a nutshell, feel that countries like the US have had the domination, have held the strength and the dollar power, and it's time for a change. And it coincides at the moment with the state of the US dollar, the state of economies around the world, and the state of inflation, et cetera, that's happening, along with a lot of, I say the word rumors, probably there's another word for it, about financial global systems maybe having a change in the near future from fiat-based to digital, and everything that goes along with that. So there are lots of things to talk about in that regard, and lots of things happening around the place. So the acronym BRIC, which was initially stood for the original countries, there's a bit of history of how it was coined. But they have now grown, the article saying they've grown from something that was meant as a bit of an alternative now to a bit of a powerhouse, and having a lot more pull around the place, around the world. I think the article here says in 2014, with around about 46 billion euro in seed money, the BRICS nations launched the new development bank, which is an alternative to World Bank, and also the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. In addition, they created a liquidity mechanism called the Contingent Reserve Arrangement to support members struggling with payments, So these offers were not only attractive to the nations, but also to many other developing and emerging economies that had, painful experiences with the IMF and the structure and the programs that go along with that. So this is why many countries said they might be interested in joining the BRICS group. The BRICS Bank is open to new members from 2021. Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Uruguay, and Bangladesh took up shares. And you can see here that the South African Foreign Minister, Naledi, has said that worldwide interest in the BRICS group was huge. And in early March this year, she told a television interviewer she had 12 letters from interested countries on her desk, one of them being Saudi Arabia, and then Egypt, Algeria, and Argentina, Mexico, and Nigeria. So it's just showing that the popularity of the BRICS is definitely still there. There's so much happening in the world. This is just a small part of it, but it's interesting to read about, see what's happening behind the scenes, and try and stay abreast of it. So that was the reason for the video. A lot of the information is for those that have been around crypto, and those that have been around investing and finance will know about this, and it's pretty elementary what I've just described. But I'm definitely targeting people who are now starting to pull away from mainstream and starting to go down the rabbit hole and actually see what's happening in the world, and trying to get themselves abreast of it without being overwhelmed by all the information that's out there, and trying to keep it as basic and as simple as possible. And they can go step by step and find out more and more as they go along. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you could hit the like button, smash the subscribe button. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you in the next one.